Hey everybody, Resident Loser Jeremy here, and today I'm in the control. I wanted to talk about something that I do so regularly that I don't even really think about it, and I feel like that's part of the struggle with this channel. I need to kind of get over those things that I do every day, thinking that everybody else knows exactly what I'm talking about all the time. Today I want to talk about how and why you should record your own drum samples. Basically every time you record a drum set. We're going to talk about how to do that, why to do that, and what situations you might use that. Kind of the for better or worse discussion about drum samples. Let's get going. So here's a piece of what I'm working on. For the most part, completely unmixed. I really like those drum sounds. Luckily, I took some samples of this session. So let's fly over there. Okay, so here we are in the sample session. Now let me walk you through kind of what we've done. So in this whole thing, we recorded quite a few songs with this group. I know I'm gonna want to do some things to the drums because in this kind of praise and worship realm, there's a lot of really cool drum sounds. Drums are big in this genre and it's really hard to get right. The use of samples is almost a necessity in something like this because if I were to solo the snare, I'm going to have a little bit of bleed of just about everything. I'm gonna have some hi-hat bleed, I'm gonna have some kick bleed, I'm gonna have some weird stuff in there that I just clearly don't want. So what have I done here? I've gone through and I've actually recorded every hit of the shells. I don't take cymbal hits every single time I do something like this. I don't find that I use those much, and when they're kind of for me, I don't do more than I need. So we're doing 5 different hits of every dynamic level. So kind of a really, really soft hit, a medium hit, and a hard hit. And on snares, you kind of get a bonus. There's a rim shot. So there's 4 dynamic levels with a snare and basically 3 for every other drum. And the soft can be very, very soft, medium, and then just hard as you can hit it, given the context of what you're recording. So once we settled on a sound that we really liked, we got the new heads on the drum, we got them all tuned up. We did everything we could to get as good of a drum tone to Pro Tools. And a lot of that is actually going through the gear here. So I want to capture as much of that as possible without leaning on someone else's samples. If I'm being biased and if the drummer's being picky, we want those drums on the record to sound like the drums that were recorded in this room because that's what we want. And it is kind of easy. If you start to replace drums with too many samples of other parties, you can create something that sounds like a kick drum in space or a snare drum in space. Like it doesn't match the rest of the kit. So this kind of takes that completely out of the equation. This is the exact kit in the exact spot going through the exact method you used to record it. Chances are if you had a good sound going in, these are going to be good samples coming out, or at least useful for you. Now this is going to be different for everybody who does this because the way I record drums may be different than the way you record drums. These samples, whether or not you like them, can be a little relative because I know what I'm going to do with them after the fact. But I think this is a good starting point for something. I am going to put these up for sale. I'll put a link in the description below. I'm thinking only like $5. I've never really sold anything before, so I'm going to give it a try. But basically, we've got a kick, a snare, rack tom, floor tom. That's it. Kick, snare, tom. The kit we were using is a Ludwig Classic Maple. The kick drum is a 24x14. The rack tom was a 9x13. Floor tom 16x16. Those all had brand new heads on them. The snare was a Ludwig Classic Maple. I did a sample of this with a BFSD on, and if you've never seen one, this is a BFSD. Big fat snare drum. Basically, all this does is sits on your snare drum. It adds mass. It adds definitely a really thick. I mean, you can hear how thick this thing is. Woo. Let's hear the difference in the dry snare. I'll play you one here. So that's just our regular snare. Here it is with the BFSD. And then back again. Different flavors for different situations. Anyway, took all these hits. Basically, here's what it looks like. And we did the same thing with all of the drums. Like here's a kick. Here's rec tom. Here's floor tom. I've cut those up here. Got rid of mics that I don't want. Like I can hit Command M, boop, bring it back. And Command M, muted. So I've gotten rid of drums I don't want, but what do I want? So I want the actual drum that I'm hitting. Let's take, for example, this snare. Now if I turn everything on, so let's bring back the hat, the toms, all the kick mics. And because he's hitting that so hard, you can kind of hear like cymbals rattling. Maybe there's some like noise in the stands. But just getting rid of these things, because I don't really care about what the snare sounds like in the hi-hat mic or the toms mic. And sometimes you do. But let's get rid of this. Now it's a little more snare, but there's clearly some rooms there. Now the kick R44, that's kind of a room mic. So let's see what that sounds like. Yeah, I don't mind it. Why not? Here's a little trick that I learned. Sometimes with kick, that snare bottom, if those snare wires rattle, it can be really cool. So let's hear what that sounds like. Actually, I like that in there. That is basically the idea through the whole thing. So now all you want to do, highlight everything, go hit bounce. Ta-da! Here they are. What we got going on here, I literally did a bounce of everything as it is. Now, if you want even more control, I can go through and I can mute these rooms and all the trash mics individually if I want, do the same bounce again. Then end up making TCIs, which are trigger files. Those will load up in trigger, slate trigger, or just bounce them as waves. And then you have ultimate control over how much direct mic you want, how much overhead you want, how much room you want. In this instance, this is kind of a big picture. Here's what I like. Here's how I'm going to use it. But I think for you guys, I'm going to include the directs and then all the overheads in the room. So there will be kind of a my sample, which is not really processed yet. And then there will be just the direct. So directs, overheads, and rooms. And then you can kind of blend those to taste. Or use one or the other, given your need. And all that'll be $5. Now, this is our main one. So let's take a look here. Now, all this really takes is patience. Now, this is, I just duplicated our samples print, did it again so I could cut it up. So here's what that looks like. Let's make this really, really big. So now, it's a whole lot of naming. Here, you can see one. All right, so now we're going to come over here to Slate Trigger, Trigger Editor. Now, rows. We are going to have 4 rows because we have a rim shot, hard, medium, soft. Columns, we want 5 because we did 5 hits per. Now we want to bring them in. 1, 2. It's kind of a bummer that these are doing it like this. And 5. You can check to make sure they all work. It sets auto velocity. That's fine for what I do. You might want to change that. Now all you want to do is save an instrument. Let's go ahead and keep it here. Snare. Snare, 6x14 maple, BFSD. So now, when I go back, so we're going to switch sessions here for a second. I'm going to pull up that other track. We're going to kind of pretend we're starting the mixing process. Cool. Now I'm just going to do this a real easy way. I'm going to go ahead and just duplicate the snare track. Now we're going to go pull up trigger, which is in dynamics for some reason. So let's pull up our trigger, see what it does. So basically we have a perfect copy of our snare that we had used, and we can do whatever we want with it. So say we want some crazy reverb only on the snare for the choruses. And that's not going to affect the rest of the kit, as if I were to mute that track, pull that reverb up to the snare. Now listen. Kind of a mess, as opposed to just giving it its own sample, doing whatever you need to do. So say I wanted to do that just to get a little more high end, a little more bump at 220 there, and let's literally copy that to the other one. But you can hear, if I pop this back into the mix, all of a sudden we have more hi-hat, we have more everything else. Kind of pops out things in a way we don't want. So let's turn that off, literally copy it to the trigger that we made. Now let's listen. Yeah, now we have kind of what we want out of that snare. It's not affecting the entire kit that's in the snare mic. And we can even do things like we can really compress down on this, and it's not going to go crazy. Whereas if I was going to do the same thing over here, so again, this is a crazy extreme example of what can be done, just because I want to show you those things, but you end up with so much more control. If for nothing else, then you can turn up the snare a lot without killing everything else. So this is with nothing else going on. I'm just going to turn this track up. So you can see I can really pop the snare out even more because I can turn it up without turning everything else up. Now if I did the same thing with our normal snare, it's just not possible. Now you've got a really usable drum sample that's actually very functional. It's not changing the sound of your drum set. This is still raw. This is still unprocessed technically. All I have is duplicated only the snare and what's going on. I still have to go to work and finish this out and make the mix what it's supposed to be. But now I have a little more control. So the name of this game is Patience, File Management, and Patience. Basically, guys, super easy to make your own drum samples. I recommend you do this all the time. If you like these will be on sale for $5 at our website, link in the description. Anyway, if you like this one, give us a thumbs up. If you didn't like it, give us a thumbs down, but explain yourself. You need to tell me why. If you really like what we're doing here, go ahead and hit that subscribe button. If you want to be notified every time I put out a video, hit the bell right next to it. Anyway, I'll see you guys next time. Take it easy.